Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Christensen. I'm the director of the China in the World program here at Columbia University. I'm here to introduce a very special guest. Yinan He from Lehigh University is an alumni of the China in the World program, alumnus of the China in the World program. She was a fellow here when the program was still at Princeton University. And Yinan uh, Professor Hook completed her undergraduate and master's education in China, and then she moved to the United States to become a graduate student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where I happened to be a professor, lucky professor. Had a student, Yinan Hook, came to MIT while I was there. She was a truly excellent graduate student who was interested in how Japan and China dealt with history. She had very good English and very good Chinese, obviously, but she decided that if she was going to do her project, she was going to have to get very good Japanese. So while she was a graduate student, she learned Japanese as well. And then she did her field research in both Japan and China on historical issues, which produced a tremendously successful dissertation. And this is really hard to imagine, but she was an MIT graduate student in political science, and she won the institute-wide award for the best graduate student of the year at MIT, where political science is not high in the hierarchy of subjects to study. She managed to do that, and I was tremendously proud of her. Her excellent dissertation became an excellent book, The Search for Reconciliation, Sino-Japanese and German-Polish Relations Since World War II. It's a comparative study of reconciliation at Cambridge University Press. She's a professor at Lehigh University, and she has been a public intellectuals program fellow at the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. She's won scholarships from various places, the National Endowment for the Humanities, United States Institute of Peace, the MacArthur Foundation, tremendously successful scholar of whom I'm very proud. And she wanted to come and present her new book here, and we were thrilled to have her. So I will turn it over to Yinan, but please welcome her to Columbia University.
Thank you, Tom, for the very nice introduction. As Tom said, I was one of the earliest fellow of the China World Program, and my time spent here was truly transformative. So it's a great honor to be back. Thank you, Tom and Daniel, for extending the invitation. And thank you all for being here. Can you hear me, Daniel? Okay. All right. So this talk draws from my forthcoming book. Currently, the manuscript is in its final stage, so I will be very grateful for your feedback. There's still chance to refine the project. I want to start the talk with this image on the screen. This is a 1951 propaganda poster produced during the Korean War, and the title of the poster is "The Mighty Hands of the People." You can see that American imperialism, which is this guy, seems to be behind the Chiang Kai-shek, which is the bold guy here, and a bunch of hostile elements within China here, these smaller figures. Why is that lost? Okay, smaller figures here. And all of these actors seem to be linked to one another with these strings here, one here, and multiple ones here. I mean, this is probably, let's see, that's one, a few strings here. Okay, and at the same time, this towering figure in the center, which stands for Chinese people, is crushing all of these hostile forces in one single blow. This poster actually delivers a stark political message. It does not just depict a foreign enemy, it collapses domestic and foreign enemy in one united political battlefield. To me, this image provides a vivid illustration about the strategy of national othering. By that, I mean a strategy through which elites try to link their internal and external enemies in order to consolidate power, especially during critical moments of nation and state building. So in this particular case, the early PRC regime is casting the domestic resistance to the new regime as the work of foreign agents or national traitors. Therefore, they try to legitimize harsh political purges as a patriotic crusade. If we step back, we can see that this kind of internal-external linkage has surfaced repeatedly across Chinese modern history, such as during the 1920s, the Northern Expedition, 北伐, the Korean War, and the Cultural Revolution, and also the period after 1989 Tiananmen incident. But this linkage has not been constant. In other periods, you would see that the elites have intentionally muted this linkage discourse and avoided anti-foreign mobilization. So that variation leads us to the question, Daniel, this one doesn't move. So how do I? Okay, here. Okay.
Okay.
Oh no.
You went too far.
Yeah, this one. Okay.
Good.
So the research question at the heart of the project, which is when and under what conditions do elites choose to magnify or downplay the linkage between internal and external enemies. And this also opens to a broader question about consequences, which is how do these shifts in national identity discourse reshape China's attitudes toward the outside world? To answer these questions, I argue that Chinese elites employ the strategy of national othering, framing internal adversaries as foreign hostile collaborators to pursue domestic political goals. Why national othering is crafted to navigate domestic political challenges, its specific deployment also draws from the interplay of external shocks, historical memory, and elite agency. And this process over time can generate deep-seated ethnocentrism in China's image of the world and of China's own place in the world. Why this study matters, I see the project as important in at least 3 ways. Theoretically, the book fills a gap in identity studies by conceptualizing the dualistic other as an integrated internal and external adversary. The existing literature has paid more attention to foreign others rather than domestic ones, and even less attention to the relationship between the two. So this project tries to bring this relationship into the focus by looking at how the purported collusion with a foreign power can turn your domestic enemies into such dualistic others. Empirically, the book offers a different account about China's global assertiveness. I place domestic identity politics in the center of the analysis and argue that China's behavior abroad is shaped in important ways by the struggle over identity at home. In terms of a comparative contribution, the book shows that national othering can help sustain autocratic stability when you present your regime preservation as a matter of safeguarding the nation against internal and external conspiracy, then your democratic inclusion will grow narrower and your political pluralism will come under pressure. So quickly, the structure of the talk today, I'll start with the theoretical framework and then move to a quick overview of case studies covered in the book. We will look at 4 cases across more than 100 years from the late Qing until today. And I wanted to use that long historical sweep in order to show how the politics of national othering has evolved over time. Then I will turn to a closer examination of the 2019-2020 Hong Kong protests. I use this case to show how the Chinese party states intensified the internal-external linkage by the narrative about foreign black hands and local traders. And that kind of narratives helped to legitimize heavy-handed crackdown and silence potential support to the protests. And then I will conclude with implications. All right, so this slide introduces the theoretical grounding for the argument about national othering. At the heart of the framework is the idea that identity comes from a othering process, which means that groups define who they are by distinguishing themselves from those they exclude. And this kind of dynamic can generate ethnocentrism in two dimensions. The first is a dispositional dimension, meaning this tendency to emphasize differences and superiority vis-a-vis the other. And the second is the motivational tendency, which is a bias to emphasize your perception of your other through the suspicion about their negative intentions. And if these tendencies grow stronger, then ordinary national pride can give way to more militant nationalism, which is more preoccupied with external threats. Now, as I said, the identity studies, especially in the IR field, has predominantly focused on foreign others. And so my framework tried to expand that approach by emphasizing the connection between external otherings, targeting foreign nations, and the internal othering against domestic groups. I argue that when elites face severe political challenges, whether through power struggle or regime crisis, they may strategically link their internal and external enemies. This is when the so-called black sheep effect becomes particularly relevant. In social psychology, black sheep effect means a tendency to judge your inside defectors more harshly than outsiders. So if you establish this internal-external linkage in your identity's discourse, then you can portray your domestic opposition as foreign collaboration, taking advantage of the black sheep effect. Therefore, it can help justify punishment and re-education of the supposedly disloyal insiders. And okay, note this diagram illustrates the causal framework of the argument. It starts with severe challenges to elite power and the nationalist division. And at this time, this usually happens during critical moments of national development. At this time, if you only focus on attacking your domestic enemies, it may not be enough to generate legitimacy and mobilization. Okay, and so under those conditions, elites may activate internal-external linkage by leveraging the black sheep effect. And this kind of strategy can help elites to defeat their domestic enemies, to enforce public conformity, mobilize society, and often while diverting attention away from their internal problems. At the same time, the specific timing and strength of national othering also depends on a set of interacting factors here, including external shocks like wars and crisis, and the collective memories of historical grievances. But elites do not simply react to these shocks and memories. They will try to reinterpret them and harness them to serve their domestic needs. So here, elite's agency remains decisive, okay, depending on specific leaders' nationalist vision, threat perception, and strategic calculations. Some leaders may choose to mute internal-external linkage. They may try to subdue anti-foreignism. But other elites, they may decide to amplify and weaponize these shocks, these memories. to reinforce the national othering. So in a sense, this framework helps explain why national othering can be highly salient in some moments, but far less so in others. But when internal-external linkage does take hold, then it can foster a siege mentality for the nation and turn your attitude toward foreign nation to be ethnocentric and antagonistic. So I wanted to quickly.
It moved.
Yeah, okay.
Got it. It's just slow. It's not MIT, it's Columbia.
Okay. So I wanted to quickly mention that the national othering is not unique to China. Over and over again, we see that leaders across different countries and historical periods would cast their internal adversaries as so-called enemies within, working in concert with foreign powers to subvert the nation. Examples include the French Revolution, the early Soviet Union, and the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia. In contemporary populist and authoritarian setting, we also see that dissidents, minorities, and immigrants are oftentimes linked to foreign outside forces or globalist interests. So in this very example, as many of you already know, that Trump reacted to the Supreme Court's ruling on the tariff by calling the decision, quote, a disgrace to the nation. And he accused the justices of being disloyal and acting under the influence of foreign interests. So here, the underlying pattern is quite revealing that when the political outcome is unwelcome, then even the Supreme Court can be portrayed as serving foreign forces. So now I want to turn to the second part of my talk, which is to review very quickly my cases, starting with this one set in the late Qing and early Republican period. Before 1924, the internal-external linkage was actually largely muted, even though foreign imperialism posed a persistent threat to China's sovereignty during this period. During the Xinhai Revolution, the nationalist propaganda focused on anti-militarism, which is targeting domestic enemy. And after 1912, the KMT elites turned to struggle against the warlords and other domestic rivals. So throughout this earlier period, foreign imperialism was kept largely separate from domestic enemies in discourse. And Sun Yat-sen and his comrades oftentimes accommodated the imperialism rather than confront them. And why? It's because Sun Yat-sen believed that these foreign powers can be potentially source of help to his revolutionary cause. And more importantly, they desperately wanted to avoid the foreign intervention that might endanger their domestic goals. But they got a problem here, which is that their call to overthrow the warlords and to establish a republican democracy simply failed to win widespread support across the country. So they needed a new and more compelling nationalist messaging to rally support. And the pivot, from the internally focused national identity to one that fused internal-external struggle came around 1924, when Sun Yat-sen and later Chiang Kai-shek called for China to oppose both warlords and imperialism at the same time. Okay? And this linkage narrative gained particular traction during the 1925 May 30th movement. The movement unleashed a tidal wave of anti-imperialist anger, and the KMT and the CCP, at that time they were allies, they were quick to capitalize on this national sentiment to galvanize support for their northern expedition that started in 1926. So this logic were evident from some of the propaganda posters from that time, and this one produced during the May 30th movement is showing the imperialism, this one, and Junfa warlords, they're together strangling the Chinese people here. And this one was circulated during the Northern Expedition and showing that masks are smashing imperialism and warlords. Okay, so these images basically place the domestic enemies and foreign enemies within the same structure of national operation and called for their simultaneous destruction. And after the KMT split with the CCP in 1927, it redirected the same strategy against the communists as the agents of Soviet Red imperialism. So that's the first case. Okay, the second one, the Korean War. As we know that after the PRC was first founded in 1949, the regime initially moved cautiously under a transitional period called New Democracy, 新民主主义. The CCP leadership at the time were certainly eager to transform China into a socialist state, but they were forced to delay that vision because of the massive domestic instability and the severe economic crisis at the time. And during this period, they also kept their anti-American rhetoric fairly restrained. But the outbreak of the war created opening for a sharper turn. Okay. Through the Resist America anti-Korea movement, the party advanced domestic mass campaigns such as the suppression of counter-revolutionaries, land reform, 3 antis, 5 antis, and so forth. With what I call the grand conspiracy narrative, the government branded its regime enemies as American collaborators embedded within the nation, therefore justify massive political purges. And that fusion strategy peaked not in the opening stage of the war, when the national security threat was supposed to be most precarious, but from early 1951, when the war was reaching a stalemate and the security conditions started to improve. And also the RAK 抗美援朝 propaganda extended well beyond just the war mobilization. The party used anti-Americanism to push for those previously postponed radical social changes and also consolidate the new regime. So the next case is
Sorry.
okay. The next case is maybe I'll choose mine. Is there a place to plug this in? Yeah. The next case looks at the anti-Sovietism during the Sino-Soviet split decade. And this case is a perfect illustration of how this internal-external linkage can be turned on and off based on domestic needs. So in 1959, Mao Zedong faced growing criticism of his Great Leap Forward policies. And this time he found it useful to activate the linkage in order to silence party dissidents like Peng Dehuai, branding them as agents of Moscow. And after Great Leap Forward collapsed, there was a brief period when the linkage narrative relaxed. It's the time when the political pragmatism took over and the anti-Soviet sentiment or rhetoric was toned down. But from late 1962, Mao Zedong revived the class struggle to counter what he perceived to be revisionist threat to his utopian vision and his personal authority. This effectively intertwined the domestic and foreign anti-revisionist struggle. And the linkage discourse peaked during the Cultural Revolution, when Mao's domestic rivals were purged as China's Khrushchevs. I wanted to emphasize that during all this time when anti-Soviet propaganda was running high, there wasn't any imminent Soviet national security threat yet. It was not until the late 1960s when border tensions intensified with Soviet Union, and then Mao invoked Tsarist memories to sharpen anti-Soviet sentiment in order to, mobilize for his domestic revolution. So this logic you can find from these Cultural Revolution caricatures. Okay, this first one, Liu Shaoqi is playing. Liu Shaoqi and Khrushchev are playing the same revisionist tune together. And the second one, Liu is wearing a robe decorated by Chinese character shou, meaning revisionism. And he's writing some revisionist thought while Khrushchev is holding the candlelight for him. So these images basically showing Liu Shaoqi is politically associated with Khrushchev. Therefore, domestic rivalries can be cast as a struggle against the Soviet-linked revisionism.
Top one has international implications. 三合一手
Yeah, 三合一手 is an international policy. 三子一包 is
王家祥
domestic
的那个先学的那个
Yeah, right. Wang Jiaxiang. So this is the foreign policy. This is domestic policy. So he's saying that the Khrushchev and Liu Shaoqi are echoing each other on their policies, domestic and foreign. Yeah. Okay, so the last case looks at the period from Tiananmen 1989 to today. Post Tiananmen, the party state faced a perfect storm with Western sanctions, elite infighting, and the regime crisis. So it responded with a media campaign condemning the Western peaceful evolution and labeling domestic liberals as pawns of foreign powers to subvert the socialist state. Then this linkage actually softened under Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin, who more prioritized economic reform and international engagement. But since Hu Jintao, the linkage has been revived in order to address rising social instability and secure regime legitimacy. By linking domestic scent to foreign subversion, they can delegitimize internal resistance and redirect popular discontent. And under Xi Jinping, national othering, in my opinion, has moved to the center of CCP governance. Okay, and here internal resistance is now treated simply as a national security threat, linked to 敌对势力 hostile forces both at home and abroad. And this is particularly evident in official rhetoric about anti-espionage, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong. So next, I will focus on Hong Kong, but I'll be happy to talk about anti-espionage and the Xinjiang and any of those earlier historical cases during the Q&A in more detail. All right, so before diving into the Hong Kong case, I want to quickly sketch the core dynamics of national othering under Xi. Since 2013, he has combined an ambitious vision about national rejuvenation with an acute sense of regime insecurity. And that sense of insecurity has been aggravated by slowing economic performance at home and growing tensions with foreign countries, especially Western countries. So the party needed a more powerful nationalist narrative in order to justify coercion, to channel public discontent, and to sustain loyalty. So this is the context for Xi Jinping's securitization drive, okay, centered on the narrative about the hostile forces. Here, the internal-external security have become tightly interconnected, and political security is deemed paramount. Also, I want to mention that history and the digital media control have made the official message much more powerful. Under Xi, the old story about national humiliation has been folded into a new, confident narrative about civilizational revival. Therefore, any domestic dissent or foreign criticism can be understood as attempts to obstruct China's rejuvenation. And in terms of the media control, the so-called the rise of newer propaganda state. That's the term they describe Xi Jinping's media control regime, the newer propaganda state, which allowed the government to not just censor unwanted content, but also flood the digital sphere with officially sanctioned rhetoric and squeeze out dissent. So as we mentioned that national othering can give rise to ethnocentrism. This figure captures this ethnocentric turn under Xi compared to the Hu Jintao period, especially vis-a-vis the Western countries. And you can see here official media references of keywords related to the superiority of China model versus the West, and which is the dispositional dimension of the ethnocentrism that we mentioned earlier, and the references about foreign hostile forces against China, which is the motivational dimension, that have both risen sharply, especially since late 2010s. So this is the broad discursive setting in which the Hong Kong case unfolds. So now I wanted to dive into the Hong Kong case. Starting with this political crisis that happened since from early 2019 that lasted for several months and involved millions of people in street demonstrations. And for Beijing, it was not just the local unrest. It really challenged the broader authority of the party state. And at the same time, Western sanctions and criticism just deepened that sense of crisis. The party then responded by formulating a familiar narrative about national othering, labeling local agitators as traitors, and accusing them of colluding with foreign black hands. And across traditional media and digital platforms, this official rhetoric just saturated the information space. So this shows how Beijing builds a sustained kind of propaganda campaign about Hong Kong that ties the unrest to foreign hostility. Here, the blue bars stand for People's Daily articles that reference the internal threats in Hong Kong. And these orange segments are articles that went beyond to link these internal threats to foreign hostile forces. And you can see that there was a spike in 2014, which is the time of Occupy Central movement. And that you can see was mainly driven by this spike about rhetoric about internal threats only. But the more dramatic surge from 2019 to 2024 were also driven by a sharp increase of rhetoric that linked to the internal and external threats. This shows a much stronger effort to portray the unrest as foreign-driven activities. And this People's Daily Weibo image visualizes the internal-external linkage logic. Here, Uncle Sam, which stands for America, is standing behind a local democratic activist, which looks to me like yeah, and he's placing his hands on the shoulders of Josh Wong. And in the background, there's this scene of unrest looming, okay? And this image here gives us the message, which is that the Hong Kong unrest is basically a foreign orchestrated color revolution, and the local protesters are reduced to just instruments of these foreign forces. And this is semantic network gives us a closer look at how the official rhetoric is structured. This network is built from more than 1,300 People's Daily Weibo posts that were relevant to the crisis and published between June 2019 and the end of 2021, which was the peak time of Beijing's propaganda campaign about Hong Kong. Now, several clusters stand out from the network. This pink one frames the unrest through a chaos versus control narrative with keywords like destruction, violence versus police and law enforcement. And the green clusters with keywords like national flag and motherland turns the crisis into a matter of national loyalty and patriotism. And for my argument, more important are the orange and the blue clusters. Here, democratic opposition figure like Jimmy Lai here, and themes like Hong Kong independence and disrupting Hong Kong are drawn into the same discursive space as language about foreign interference, like sanctions, United States, and interference, and so forth. So the bottom line here is that domestic dissent and foreign hostility are organized within the unified securitization narrative where they portray the Hong Kong unrest. Now, once the protests are placed within this integrated threat narrative, it can serve multiple strategic purposes. Okay, the narrative demonized democratic opposition as foreign lackeys, traitors, and Trojan horse within China. It also shifted responsibility for the crisis away from Beijing onto foreign interference and its local praxis. At the same time, this kind of narrative provides ideological cover for repression, above all through the 2020 Hong Kong National Security Law. And in that law is a particular clause which is, allows the government to charge the people for collusion with foreign forces. And that term gives the authorities a sweeping tool to criminalize dissent. So the result was massive arrests and prosecutions and a sharp decline in public support to protest activity. Now, this slide shows how this propaganda strategy was put into action. Here is a Xinhua image. Is branding Jimmy Lai as 民族败类, the nation scum. And he's depicted throwing dollar bills into this anti-China Hong Kong destabilizing unrest. And onto his back affixed multiple banners marked with the Chinese word "pan," meaning betrayal. Okay. And here, additionally, these concordance examples gives this logic in a visual form. Here, American actors are accused of fueling local unrest, such as cheering on and emboldening Hong Kong writers. And it also denounced the democratic opposition, people like Jimmy Lai, as puppets and pawns of hostile forces and acting as traitors. So across these visuals and these texts, the propaganda gives you the message that all these unrest, all these crises should be blamed on foreign conspiracy and local betrayal. And these accusations in turn provide the ground for repression. So how effective is this narrative? Okay, clearly this propaganda gained widespread traction on the mainland, where you have this strictly controlled information environment that censored alternative interpretation and penalized dissent. Also, patriotic education helped to nurture this kind of a reaction, which is to show that to portray Hong Kong's colonization as national humiliation and its return to China a symbol of rejuvenation. Therefore, any resistance to to Beijing can be easily understood as some kind of attempt to obstruct the rejuvenation and betray of the nation. So the most obvious or visible reaction you can see among the Chinese public is hostility or even disgust toward the protesters. And that said, well, broad resonance does not mean complete consensus, okay? Because counter narratives still continue to circulate. So here are a couple of analyses that capture the two sides of the story. This one on the left explains why this narrative has become so popular among the Chinese people. But this piece on the right points to counter reading. Okay, which nevertheless survived alongside with the official narrative. So the bottom line is that the official rhetoric is dominant, but not uncontested. And the counter-narrative continue to endure, although under far weaker and riskier conditions. So I want to wrap up with some broad implications about these findings. First, about how China views the world. Okay, my book finds that foreign nations don't become China's significant others just because of some kind of past, historical grievances or contemporary threats. Instead, it happens when elites strategically link these countries to their internal boundaries of inclusion and exclusion through the strategy of national othering. Therefore, we won't be able to completely understand China's changing attitudes toward foreign nations without considering the nuance of domestic identity politics. And for comparative politics, the book finds that national othering can bring together the three pillars of autocratic stability. Now, here, support for the regime, which is legitimation, is recast as a patriotic duty, and the repression becomes national defense, and the co-optation becomes narrower and more disciplinary. Also, national othering can constrain democratic inclusion by producing a form of what I call conditional citizenship, meaning that your full national belonging is contingent on your political or cultural conformity. And this can put the dissidents and the ethnic minorities in a vulnerable position. They can be vulnerable for exclusion or for unequal rights. For Chinese politics, with the slowing economy and growing cost of coercion, the party state is relying more heavily on national othering to generate what I call reactive public support. By that, I mean this kind of support that's not less rooted in genuine public support of the government policy, but rather more about rooted in public fear of some kind of internal chaos or foreign threat. And this strategy in the short term can produce stability for the party state, but the longer term costs are higher because it blocks political reform, it deepens chauvinism towards ethnic minorities, and pushes China further towards hard authoritarianism. And finally, we must consider its implication for China's foreign relations. My book finds that with national othering becoming China's centerpiece, or at least a durable fixture of the CCP rule, it can constantly reproduce an image of a hostile enemy in your national identity discourse. And this kind of rhetorical engine can do two things. One is to intensify popular pressure on the government and reduce significantly the policy flexibility of the government. And it also can institutionalize self-delusion. Okay, it's like the blowback effect that Jack Snyder talks about, when the negative enemy image bakes into your bureaucratic routine, then it can distort the cognitive environment for strategic decision, and can replace objective analysis with worst case some assumption and a zero sum thinking. And these forces do not just strain your foreign relations, it can also lock in a trajectory towards a sustained confrontation and fundamentally increase China's risk of international conflict. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much. I look forward to your